Justin Trudeau is attempting the single largest gun ban in Canadian history. I'm Sheila Gunn Reid, and you're watching The Gun Show. In 478 pages of last-minute amendments to their latest gun control legislation, the Liberals are banning almost all hunting rifles and shotguns in this country. These changes to Bill C-21, the law that bans the sale and transfer of handguns, will directly attack hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Canadian firearms owners. These amendments will outlaw, quote, a firearm that is a rifle or shotgun that is capable of discharging center fire ammunition in a semi-automatic manner and that is designed to accept a detachable cartridge magazine with a capacity greater than 5 cartridges of the type for which the firearm was originally designed. Now, this ban includes the popular and affordable SKS, with around 200,000 estimated Canadian owners of that model. It also includes almost all hunting rifles, with the exception of a few shotguns designed for duck hunting. Now, it's not entirely clear how the RCMP will enforce Trudeau's changes through confiscation, since the police force has no reliable data on where these previously completely unrestricted firearms are. So joining me tonight to discuss the latest attacks on the law-abiding Canadian firearms owning community is Rick Igersich, president of Canada's National Firearms Association. Take a listen. This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by
Adam So's here for Rebel News. You know, our company is growing quickly, and we'd actually like for your company to grow too. That's why this ad space that I'm speaking through right now is actually available for you to purchase. So instead of people listening to me, they could actually be learning about your company, learning about your business. If this interests you, if this is an opportunity you'd like to capitalize on, send us an email at ads@rebelnews.com.
So joining me now is Rick Igersich, the president of Canada's National Firearms Association, to, first of all, break down what Trudeau's latest attacks on the law-abiding Canadian firearms owning community mean for the rest of us. And then we'll get into why he thinks this is happening. Rick, thanks for coming on the show and taking the time to explain all of this. As you and I were talking sort of off camera before we started rolling, us gun owners, sometimes it does feel like we speak a little bit of a different language to people who are unfamiliar with firearms. So why don't you break down for us what the latest gun ban is? Because we've already sort of lived through the grandfathering out of our handguns. Now we've moved on to hunting rifles.
Yes, we have. Hi, Sheila. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate that. You know what? This whole thing, Bill C-21, it started off as another series of Justin Trudeau's assaults against Canadians' personal property. And, you know, the key parts of the bill were complete. First of all, it started off as a complete ban on all transfers of handguns. So basically what that was, handguns, once you were in possession of a handgun and it was registered to you, it couldn't go anywhere. Until you died, then it went back to the government actually it was seized by the government for destruction. So basically, you couldn't air your handguns to anybody. You couldn't sell them. You couldn't trade them. You couldn't give them to anybody. You know, family members or anybody else were excluded from this. So that's how it all started. Then they put a ban on all handguns coming into Canada. They did that by ministerial powers. That wasn't incorporated into the order in council. They did that by ministerial powers. And the initial parts of the bill, there was a bunch of ridiculous magazine capacity restrictions that were all tacked onto it. You know, the classic thing. You know, the Liberals draw up a bill, then they add a bunch of hidden parts to it. Mm-hmm. And then the talk of the town the last week or so, at the 11th hour, the whole thing snowballed. First, the Liberals they added Amendment G4, which is their so-called evergreen program, which supposedly defines prohibited firearms and magazines in Canada. And they tacked that on at the last minute. Then when we thought then when we thought it couldn't get any worse, they added an amendment G46, which attached the original May 2020 Order in Council ban list to Bill C-21, plus another 430 center fire hunting rifles and shotguns, plus variants. And the key word on that is variants, because there is no definition of a variant. But the Liberals use it as a political term. So we don't even know what, besides the 430 firearms they added to the list, the variants are. So anyway, at the end of the day, just to lay it out for everyday Canadians, they did this. In my opinion, they did this for several reasons. The number one reason is, it's the classic Liberal move to get the heat off themselves when they're starting to feel it in Ottawa, and this is for a variety of reasons. Number one, the Arrive Can app scandal. The exploitation of the tragedy in Nova Scotia for political gain. Something that you guys have really been involved in, the Emergency Measures Act that Justin Trudeau put in place in Ottawa during the trucker convoy protest. The Bitcoin scandal involving several MPs. This is another diversion to get the heat off the Liberal Party. And in my opinion, the two biggest reasons, by attaching the original Order in Council plus these other hunting firearms to Bill C-21, that's basically going to null and void all the court cases that have been filed, including the one the NFA is funding. So if this bill becomes law, all those court cases will be nullified, and they will no longer exist, because there was a lot of holes in the Order in Council, and they knew that. And so I think this is a reason they attach it to the bill. But the big thing too is when they attached the original Order in Council to this bill, and with the other 430 firearms that they just pulled out of the blue, they did not talk about any sort of buyback or compensation for these firearms. So I think the Liberals realized that this was going to cost them billions of dollars. So in their Justin Trudeau's twisted wisdom, he decided he was going to attach this to this bill, so to save billions of dollars in his already over excessive spending. So, that's basically my take on it, and I hope everyday Canadians can understand that this is more than just about firearms. This is the government seizing your personal property. It goes well beyond firearms. What's next? Hunting knives? What's next? White vans? It's a definite overreach by the Liberals, and we at the NFA, we're going to do everything we can to prevent this from happening. Right now, we're working with our legal team, and I don't have a lot to comment on that. We're keeping our cards fairly close to our chest, because we don't want them to get a hint of what we're doing. So we're definitely working in the background, and just when it comes to light of what we're going to do, we're definitely going to release it to everybody.
Yeah, it does feel like the Liberals are scapegoating the most law-abiding part of society, statistically speaking, to distract from their own scandals. I think you're right there. But from the very beginning, I mean, it was a lie from the very beginning, and it was wrong from the very beginning, because in that first Order in Council that banned 1,500 popular models of Canadian firearms, including a .410 bird gun, that its biggest crime was looking cool on that one. Yeah. They said from the very beginning, this is about getting military grade assault weaponry away from the people who shouldn't have it. And they kept saying, this is not an attack on hunters and sports shooters. We will never touch those guns. This isn't about that. But then when they include center fire in this, it touches all of those. This is a direct attack on hunters and sports shooters. Although, it always was before, but now we're specifically targeting those rifles. Can you explain to, again, the people who may not know a lot about firearms, what it means by targeting the center fire rifles?
Okay, in the original OIC, most of those rifles, except for a few 22 rimfire rifles, were all center fire rifles. But now I think more than centerfire, I think what they're targeting now is hunting rifles, hunting and sporting rifles. Centerfire rifle is just a type of cartridge that is fired with a firing pin into a primer or the center of the cartridge, which really doesn't really come into play a lot. But I think our focus it needs to be more towards the hunting rifles.
Yep.
They're banning rifles that were built for nothing more than hunting or sport shooting. And by doing that, they, some of these rifles have different configurations. And so if you take a basic center fire, I'll actually use a rimfire, for example, a Ruger 1022 rimfire, which is probably the most common 22 farmer's rifle in Canada right now. And you put a different stock on it with a grip that's more ergonomic, so your wife or your young children can shoot it better because of smaller frames. Then all of a sudden, well, it looks like an assault rifle, so let's add that to the list.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think that's exactly what they did with the Mini 14, with the ranch rifle. Looked cool. It was reliable. It was, great for small predator control. And they banned it because it has the ability to look cool after the fact.
And that's actually a better example, Sheila. Thanks for that. The Ruger ranch rifle. It was a semi-automatic center fire rifle that, by Canadian law, is limited to 5 rounds magazine capacity. And all of a sudden, overnight, the thing becomes a dreaded assault weapon. You look up assault weapon in the dictionary. There's no such thing. Just like their use of assault weapon and variant. This glass of water could be an assault weapon if one used it in that direction. And and it just and I don't know what their train of thought is, but actually I do know what their train of thought is. It's just they're just going to overwhelm the public, starting with firearms owners and branching out from there, by all these terms and all these things. And my people have been telling me there's a potential election in the spring. So all this stuff always happens. They always use the firearms owners as a wedge issue every time. The last 2 elections, it's the same old song and dance from Justin Trudeau's Liberals. But I think people are starting to realize that there's more to this, because every time the heat's on them or there's an election, there's an election in the near future, they start dumping on firearms owners, and I think people are starting to realize that. And and they're not going to let it become a wedge issue this time, in my opinion.
And they did this in such a sinister way. That amendment wasn't like a one-line amendment. It was a 478-page amendment to an existing law, or a law that they were working on. And you and I, again, we were talking off camera, that they're catching the SKS in this. And so people will say, oh, who cares about the SKS? Well, the SKS is pretty old. It's Soviet designed. And it's basically a Soviet designed surplus rifle. But the thing about the SKS is it's cheap. It's a gun show rifle. You go to the gun show, you can pick up an SKS for pretty cheap. They're pretty customizable. And what I mean by...
And there's millions of them in Canada.
Well, yeah, they say there are about 200,000. But the point I was I'm definitely sure there's more. And how could they ever know? And that's the point I'm trying to make, is this bill or this amendment is just a bunch of pointless virtue signaling, because how the hell are you ever going to find all those? Because they've moved them from non-restricted to banned. So you have no record of So you have no record of where any of those are. So what do you want the RCMP to do now, Justin Trudeau? Go around kicking in doors of anybody who holds a PAL to see if they have an SKS? I mean, think about the implications of this here.
Yeah, it's and the thing is too, and the alleged original long gun registry, which was supposed to disappear 10 years ago, apparently it's still around. Quebec's using it, so. Yeah, in my opinion, it's pretty much an obsolete list. A lot of those firearms have changed hands since then. But you know what? It's a starting point for them to begin to start tracking these firearms down. And that that brings the next thing in question. What kind of resources are going to be or these confiscations, these looking for these guns, how much of the provincial resources are they going to take up, by putting these programs into place? It's everybody, it's all smoke and mirrors till everybody starts talking about the money. Well, number one, money for the firearms owners, because apparently they're not going to get any for all these firearms. And I talked to a guy yesterday that's got 70 some rifles and handguns, and he's got if all this stuff goes through, he's going to have two firearms left out of 70 some firearms. That he's been collecting, and they've been family heirlooms, and they've been passed through the generations. All of a sudden, that stuff is all gone, all null and void. You know what? He dies. This stuff goes. His family, his heirs don't get any money. They don't get any compensation for this. And he's been saving this. It's just like RSPs. Basically, you're saving this stuff. For someday to make your family have a better life. And now that's all done. And going in that direction, the ramifications on this are jutting out in all directions. It's easy to say for the Liberals, we're going to ban all these firearms. We're going to make Canada safe, which is another joke that we should probably touch on. Sure. But to make we're going to make Canada safe, but it's all smoke and mirrors, and it's going to be, no matter what they do, whether it goes through or not, it's becoming a major expense to Canadian taxpayers.
Well, and I don't know about you in Ontario, but at least here in the Western provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the Yukon too, they've all said we are not going to ask our police forces to enforce these laws. They're too busy dealing with real crimes. I know particularly in Alberta, that's where the focus is that Justin Trudeau's RCMP are not going to go around kicking in doors of Albertans to enforce gun laws that will not make our communities any safer. What's the hope for our Ontario friends, Rick?
Well, I'll tell you something. I was in the Ontario Parliament yesterday, and my MPP, who is she worked for our Conservative MPP for 20 years. Her name's Bobby Ann Brady. Unfortunately, with shuffles and stuff in the last election, she had to run as an independent. I don't know what the deal was there with the Conservatives and stuff, but she ended up winning my riding. She stood up in Parliament yesterday and posed a question to the Solicitor General on whether or not Doug Ford is going to be using police Ontario taxpayers' money and police resources to be part of Justin Trudeau's seizure program. And actually, she was and she got into a little deeper. Actually, we're going to be releasing that probably today. I'll send you a copy of that. She actually got some applause, which was unheard of. Some of the Conservative backbenchers were actually clapping after she suggested it, which actually stunned me a bit. I was sitting in the VIP gallery there, almost beside her, and I'm going, "Wow, these people are actually listening." But and I think the big problem with Ontario is, and I'm going to call a spade because Doug Ford is getting Liberal money, federal money, and I don't think he really wants to go forward with this. But I tell you, Ontario is it's a lot like Alberta. We do have a large rural area in Ontario, and the rural people are fed up with this stuff. Why, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, New Brunswick, the Yukon are all on board in this. Why is Ontario not on board with this? So, basically, Bobby Ann put the Solicitor General on the spot, with no previous, which caught him off guard, which was kind of interesting too, because she did not previously put her question in. So he did the classic, the classic political shuffle. They call it question period because there's never any answers in question period, mostly all questions most of the time. Mm-hmm. But, it was good, and I thought it got a really good response from some of the Conservatives. So we'll see what happens from them. She's going to continue to write letters to the Solicitor General about this. And, as an independent MPP, the first one in Ontario provincial history, she doesn't have a lot of power, but at the end of the day, nobody's going to tell her what to do. She's going to, and the other thing was she doesn't have any irons in the fire in this. She's not a firearms owner, but she believes in what's right, which I thought was really good. She's got absolutely no irons in the fire, but she understands what's right, and she understands what's right for her constituents. So, like I say, this is put into put it into Parliament, and I think it might go somewhere. It's actually going to gain some attention.
Yeah, I think let's move on to the safety issue, because it sort of ties into what you're talking about here. When you look at the size of Toronto, it's larger population-wise than I think Alberta, Saskatchewan, and possibly Manitoba combined. There's about 10 million people. The Greater Toronto, or six-ish, maybe, I think it is. So that's greater than at least Alberta and Saskatchewan combined. And the people who live in Toronto, you never have to leave the city. Ever.
Exactly.
Like you can like live and die in the city of Toronto and never set foot outside to see how the other half lives. I think in Alberta and Saskatchewan, at least, even in our big cities, even in the socialist hellscape of Edmonton, you do have to once in a while venture outside of the city. You do realize that there are things that exist in between Edmonton and Calgary. There are people living their lives another way. I don't know if people in Toronto are that tied to the community outside. In Alberta, people are often just one generation away from the farm.
Exactly. Myself being a farm boy from Southern Ontario, I drove into Toronto yesterday to the Parliament. I go, I don't know how people do this every day.
I know.
It took me an hour to go 3 city blocks, but anyway, the biggest, I think that one of the biggest problems, with Toronto is that you're right. It's a very diverse community, and people don't really know what's going on outside of the what I call the liberal block of the 20 some ridings that are, some of them aren't any bigger than a city block, which basically control all elections. It just the lines are so slim there, it's ridiculous. But anyway, you're right, Sheila. They haven't got a clue what's going on. They haven't got a clue about sustenance hunting. They haven't got a clue about predator control. If there's a coyote eating mine or your chickens, that coyote is going to be dispatched. It's affecting what we do, our husbandry, our farming. And people have no idea. And I think and that's one of our biggest struggles, yours and mine, is to reach these people and make them understand that things are a little different out in the rural areas.
Well, and I think this is, and I'm not blaming the people who don't know these things. I'm blaming the people who are purposefully scapegoating everybody else for the problems of the progressive big cities. Where are the conservative MPPs in Ontario to do their best to dispel the myths about firearms owners? Because if your only experience is gun violence in Toronto, of course, I understand why you're scared of guns. But if you put it to them, those guns are trafficked across the border from the United States. Those people carrying them illegally around playgrounds have not gone through the daily vetting that you and I go through to own our firearms. I think you can change hearts and minds, but liberal politicians play on the naivety of the voter. And I don't think conservative politicians, particularly the MPPs, are doing themselves any favors.
You know what? I agree with you, Sheila, too. And things are a little different in the West where you are, because it's mostly rural. But, and that's the thing, and it's lack of education. And it's not just lack of education to the citizens or the constituents of the riding. It's lack of education to these MPPs.
Yeah.
A lot of these MPPs don't have a clue what's going on. I talk to a lot of these people, and I talk about gun crime, and I talk about smuggled firearms, and and Justin Trudeau, lowering mandatory minimum sentences and stuff, and none of that stuff clicks. Yeah. Although give the Solicitor General of Ontario credit, he did mention that 90% of crime is done by illicit smuggled guns. So he did actually mention that in Parliament yesterday. Kudos for him for mentioning that. Of course, he skated around the issue of whether or not Doug Ford's going to jump on board with not funding police to do these seizures. But he did. I think because he was caught off guard, he did let some of the stuff let the cat out of the bag on some of the stuff, and it was actually pretty good stuff. And he did touch on that. Which I appreciate. He did make the comment that 90% of all crime in Ontario is done by illicit firearms. So, which is, if there was nothing else gained by that was a good thing that he did make that statement in Parliament.
Well, and the Liberals know this. When they're snatching your guns and my guns and making sure that my daughter can never use my father's firearms, that's her only connection to him because he died before she was born. You know, the Liberals know that it is a poisonous lie to scapegoat hunters and sports shooters for the crimes happening in places like Toronto. In fact, it is the Liberals who are responsible for that, at least in part through their open border policies. They have, you have people walking across the border, just strolling in across the border. They bring with them all manner of contraband. And instead of dealing with that, the Liberals increasingly take the path of least resistance because they know those people over there, they go about their business every day to follow the rules. Why would we worry about the people who don't?
Yeah, we talked about this the last time we spoke, and it was about their go-to is guns and discrimination every time.
Yeah,
you're right. It's an easy way for them to not focus on the real problem. This, they refuse, in my opinion, they refuse to focus on the real problem. The illegal firearms coming in. If they took half the money that's projected that they're going to spend on this firearm seizure, firearms ban, these bills, these OICs, if they took half that money and put it towards crime in all of Canada, it would do a lot more than taking firearms out of the hands of law-abiding firearms owners. Like you mentioned before, Sheila, that we're vetted every day. We're probably if not the safest people in Canada. If there's anything that pops up, the police show up at your house, it shows up. You know what? It shows up in their CPEC system that we're a firearms owner. So we're vetted every day. And that just shows the lunacy of this whole ordeal with the Liberals.
Yeah, when we get a traffic ticket, we get run through CPIC. Yeah. So we are monitored once daily, and every time we have any sort of police contact, good or bad. And boy, wouldn't it be great if they spent those kind of resources on just intel on the gangs in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. But no, again, take the path of least resistance and pat themselves on the back for doing something about it. And
good job, Justin.
Good job, Justin. And bringing in absolutely unenforceable gun bans. You can't ban basically everything except a smattering of duck rifles or duck shotguns and then say, we're definitely going to enforce this. Is it absolutely impossible? Now, you guys at the NFA are doing great work. How do people support the work that you're doing and find out about what you're doing next?
Well, you know what? The biggest way is, you can visit our website, nfa.ca, become a member. Most of the money, except for office staff and some incidental, goes back into the firearms lobby and us lobbying for your rights. Follow us on social media. And you know what? Even if you're not a member, please donate. Donate because that money is going towards the good fight in Ottawa. Other things you can do is write your MP. People need to talk to their MPs. Write your MPs. Tell them your feelings. Tell them what's going on, and get some input. Ask them, he or she, what they are doing to stop this. And the biggest thing, and Sheila and I talked about this about a week and a half ago, is get out and vote and get these Liberals out of power.
Yeah. Your guns are never safe when there's a Liberal around. And also, by the way, if you got a Liberal friend, take them to the gun range. I've never seen something more effective in changing the hearts and minds of people who don't like guns than to actually take them to the gun range where they can experience how much fun guns are, but also how much firearms owners are committed to safety. Take a Liberal to the gun range, change a mind.
Absolutely. You know what? And I've done that before. And you know what? They're almost scared to say that they're having fun because it goes against their party's values. It's ridiculous. You know what? The guy's having fun and, off the record or, there's no cameras rolling off the record. This is a lot of fun. But, get out and say that to your people, and but it's Justin Trudeau has he rules with an iron fist for his party, and I don't think that's ever going to change until we get rid of him.
Yes. And I don't see a party revolt to get rid of him on the horizon anytime soon. There are a lot of people who are just happy to have hitched their cart to that horse for some reason. Rick,
including his ethics minister.
Yeah, yes. Rick, thanks so much for coming on the show and taking the time to break down Justin Trudeau's latest attacks on people like you and me, my daughter, our in-laws, normal people all across the country. I think it is forgotten in all of this that more people are licensed firearms owners in this country than play organized hockey. Our national sport is sports shooting by the numbers. And I think the Liberals would do well to remember it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. And I appreciate this opportunity to reach out through you guys. The NFA really appreciates. Thanks again, Sheila.
Thanks, Rick. We'll have you on again very, very soon.
Thank you.
This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by
my mug. I know, it's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
Again, if you'd like to sign our petition calling on the federal government to end their relentless attacks on Canada's law-abiding firearms community, please head on over to handsoffourguns.ca. Now, this is the portion of the show where I welcome your viewer feedback because I want to know about what you think about the work that we're doing here at Rebel News, and specifically in this instance, what you think about the work that I'm doing. It's one of the reasons I give out my email. If you want your letter to be read on air, it's Gun Show Letters in the subject line, GUNN, by the way. And my email is sheila@rebelnews.com. But do not hesitate to leave a comment on one of the other platforms where you might find us, like on Rumble or even on the censorship platform of YouTube. Now, today's letter actually comes from Rumble, and it's on my show last week that I did with the young journalists who are covering the Public Order Emergency Commission during their time in Ottawa. The commission rolls on, but the testimony is over, the testimony from the witnesses. And for those of you who don't know, the Public Order Emergency Commission, it's the official investigation into the government's use of a counterterrorism law called the Emergencies Act against peaceful anti-regime protesters in the nation's capital earlier this year, actually in January and February. Justin Trudeau invoked that law on February 14th to extinguish nationwide anti-COVID restriction protests that were embarrassing Justin Trudeau internationally. But the largest protest was right in the nation's capital, where it is, in my experience, that the people there are quite boring. And they didn't like all the protesters coming and having fun in their streets. Anyway, Mary 2023 writes, Trudeau and the federal government gave almost no second thought to the possibility of using tanks on Canadian families with their children present at the peaceful convoy protest. Boy, isn't that right? We saw federal cabinet ministers either joking or quite seriously musing about sending in at least one tank to disrupt the protest. Now, if they're joking, that makes them horrible people, because going full Tiananmen Square on peaceful protesters in the nation's capital is no joke. And if they were serious, absolutely ghoulish. I guess they get to decide which sort of bad guy they are in this scenario. Anyway, most Canadians know that this threat from the government is hardly considered a joke, as tasteless as it was. This shows that the Canadian government are a heartless entity based on fascism and will not hesitate in murdering innocent Canadians in order to achieve a dystopian fascist dictatorship. I'm not sure if they'll hesitate to achieve it, but they did definitely joke about achieving it. And what I do know is that a conservative, if they had joked about this, they would be canceled forever, but generations of their offspring would be canceled forever. And these cabinet ministers, Marco Mendicino and David Lametti, the AG of this country, they just got to joke about it and carry on with their lives. They should have resigned. Well, everybody, that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see everybody back here in the same time, in the same place next week. And remember, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.